Hello, my name's Tim. Welcome to Tim Burbage Reads. And today I'm going to be talking to you about what I read in November. So there's a lot of books to go through. I read 15 books I'm going to be talking about today, which is a lot. A lot of them were books with my kids. It sounds like, oh, how can you read so many books? Because a lot of them are very short. But yeah, let's start through it. So the first thing I read in November was a book called Arsenal, A Random History by Magnus Allen. This is a very small little kind of novelty book that I got for Christmas, I want to say last year. It's full of little factoids, information, but I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was actually really entertaining to read because it told you about those facts and figures in an interesting way, and the person who wrote it was obviously an Arsenal fan. You know, there was a whole page about St Totteringham's Day and quite a few digs at Tottenham throughout, which was quite entertaining to read and elevated it above a typical stocking filler. The next thing was a book I read to my son, and it was Investigators, All Tied Up by John Patrick Green. So this is a comic. Investigators is a long series. We just got this one randomly. I think it's like the 8th or something in the series, but it is hilarious. It is so full of puns and plays on words and jokes where two people are misunderstanding each other. There's so many references. It was really, really entertaining. I think I enjoyed it more than my son, and my son really, really, really liked it. So I gave that one 5 stars. I thought that is a series I will definitely keep my eye on in the future, and it's a comic. It's very easy to read. The next I read was Gamora and Nebula, Sisters in Arms. This I've got a review for on the channel. I gave this 3 stars. I think it was almost really good. I just found the action scenes quite hard to decipher exactly what was going on. And the main challenge I had was you go between Gamora and Nebula, and I just found Nebula far more interesting and Gamora less so. So I think I like the fact it took place on a random planet. It was definitely the MCU version of these characters, which I enjoyed reading about. Yeah, it just didn't. It was good, and with I've read the 3 Marvel books by Mackenzie Lee. There may be more, but I've had 3 and I've read 3, and they've all been 3 to 4 stars. You know what I mean? They're all pretty good, and there's nothing wrong with that. So the next were some books that I read to... Well, actually, I didn't read these to my daughter. She gave them to me and was like, you need to read these. So I read Isadora Moon and the Frost Fairy. I read Mirabelle Has a Bad Day. I read Emerald and the Sea Sprite and Emerald and the Lost Treasure, all by Harriet Muncaster. So this follows Isadora Moon, who is half vampire, half fairy. You have her cousin Mirabelle is half fairy, half witch, and their friend Emerald is a mermaid. And I've got a video about these books on my channel, which I really recommend watching because I think they are perfect. My daughter is 5 and she loves these books so much. I think they deal with real life situations that kids have to deal with, but they do it in a fantastical setting, and the art is really great in it, and Harriet, the author, is also the illustrator. Yeah, just really, really enjoyed reading them. The next is a book I read to my son, and that was The Indoor Pirates by Jeremy Strong. This was, again, very silly, quite lightweight, but it was a good bit of fun. Only took a couple of days to read. It's a very short book. And yeah, it was very funny. It was so funny sometimes that it undercut any kind of tension in the book, but it was still an enjoyable read and my son quite liked it. The next thing, adult book I read was Burning Daylight by Jack London. That was my October book for my month of Jack London. I kind of finished it. It kind of ran into November a little bit. And I've got a review on my channel about this. I enjoyed some parts way more than others. Burning Daylight is a character, was quite interesting. I love the bits of him in the Yukon during the gold rush where nature is the main antagonist. And then he moves to San Francisco, having made his millions, and then he's dealing with bankers and financiers and all of those people, and I enjoyed it a bit less. And then there was a love story, which I did not enjoy reading, and then at the end, I thought the ending kind of wrapped it up. So I gave the book 3 stars. I did get a couple of comments in the channel on that video. Someone was like, this is the first Jack London book I read, and it actually is a good summation of quite a lot of the things that he writes about, because he does write about the wilderness, and that's my favourite part to read, but he also writes about how money corrupts people, and big business is not good for people, both consumers and people's souls. So it does cover quite a few topics that he writes about. So it could be quite a good introduction to Jack London, because you go, oh, I really like this bit, I'll read more of that. Oh, I really like this bit, I'll read more of that. It's kind of a good signposting for you. Next was a book I read to my son, which was The Great Cave by Terry Deary. We picked this up from the library. My son is doing the Stone Age at the moment, and this story was very short, but it was quite interesting to read. It was all based around these cave paintings in France, and what could the story be about? You know, where did these paintings come from? Who made them? Why did they make them? Things like that. Then we finished reading The Witches to my kids. So by Roald Dahl. The Witches is, I think it's my wife's favourite Roald Dahl book. It is brilliant. It's so real for kids. Something I really appreciate is the kids can really see, like, oh, could that woman be a witch? Oh, could that person be a witch? And the witches themselves are grotesque and horrible. What was funny was the witches are in there scheming, and they're going, oh, we're going to turn all the people into mice, and then the adults will set mouse traps, and the adults will kill their own children, and won't it be amazing? And the kids are like, oh, this is interesting. And then the chief witch, she like zaps another witch who's speaking up and like fries her into dust, and the kids are like, ooh. And then the Grand High Witch told someone to shut up, and the kids were like, oh, you can't do that, that's rude. And I'm like, she's planning to kill all the children, and she's just fried another woman, but she said shut up. That's the line. So that's, now I know where my kids' morality lies. But no, it's brilliant, it's zany, it's really quite dark and scary at points. While reading it though, there's like 2 or 3 chapters which is just the Grand High Witch doing her big speech, outlaying her plan, and while reading it to my kids, I just did voices and got rid of the dialogue tags, because there's a lot of dialogue tags, because you need that for a kid's book. But while you're doing voices, you can make it pretty clear who's saying what and who are they talking to. Then I finished a book called Thunder City by Philip Reeve. This is a book that I found in the library, and I blew up my TBR. I was like, I've got other books to read, but I just need to get this. And I realised it was brand spanking new. It's the newest book in the Mortal Engine series, which I didn't know he was writing more of. It's currently a standalone. I don't know if there's planned to be sequels. I really hope there are sequels, because this group of characters, it's got nothing to do. It's set hundreds of years before the Mortal Engines. It's set hundreds of years after the Fever Crumb prequel trilogy. So we are in the time of municipal Darwinism. Cities are mobile, huge monstrosities going around eating each other in their big mechanical like tanks moving around the Great Wastes. The characters I think are really interesting. We've got Tamsin Pook, who is she's like a gladiator kind of character, and then you've got Miss Torpenhow, who is a teacher. She's like a governess in her 40s or 50s or something, and she's the protagonist, and she's the main character. So it was nice to see characters kind of a bit outside the ordinary. There's a couple of assassins who are the best baddies. We also have the series covers something called Stalker technology, where it's kind of zombie robot people. Really, really interesting to read. Really loved it. And yeah, absolutely brilliant. Then I finished reading to my son Bunny vs. Monkey, The Impossible Pig. We picked this up at the airport when we went on holiday and read a bit of it. for our summer holidays, and then kind of picked it up later. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed this more than the first one we read. I found the first one, it was quite samey. This one, you can actually really see, this is going to sound weird, because they're comics, and each comic is like 2-3 pages, and then you have the next one. So you get a lot of stories in the 240 pages of the book. But you can really see plot progression rather than just gags. So you can see something happens to one character, and then that continues. So the next comic, the characters are just back to normal. They are suffering from whatever that is. And you could see, true progression through the comics, making it much more serialized, which I enjoyed reading. And it was still full of gags, and the characters are wacky and zany, and what they get up to is hilarious, and the art's really nice and clear. It's still definitely the language used, a bit too grown up for my son to read by himself. You know, especially like the evil, they're like, "Wah-ha-ha-ha-ha," with my evil machinations, on my illustrious plan. Like, those kind of are quite hard words for him to read. But I really enjoy reading them to him. So then I'm trying to do a different fantasy book every month. And in November, I read The Hidden Oracle, which is the first book in the Trials of Apollo series by Rick Riordan. I'm planning on doing a review of that, but I really enjoyed it. Apollo is a very interesting character to be following. His voice is quite distinctive. We meet the big bad guys. We meet the main characters. Percy Jackson is around, but he doesn't take over the show. It has been a few years since I read the Heroes of Olympus series, and this follows on directly afterwards. There were some bits that I was like, I don't know who that person is. I can't remember. I can't remember what has happened to Apollo and why he has ended up here. There was some, my memory is a bit vague and fuzzy, and that was basically for plot contrivances, which was fine. But yeah, we meet the big bad. We have a big climax. It wasn't 500 pages long, which is great to read. Very nice and easy, and still has that Rick Riordan charm to it. So I think I gave that 4 stars. And then the last book I read, which I did technically finish at the beginning of December, like 2nd or 3rd of December, but I'm going to put it in this wrap up. I mean, who's going to come after me? The Internet Video Police. I finished Adventure by Jack London, which was my November Jack London story. I want to film a review on that as well, because I have quite a lot of thoughts, where we follow a very small group of characters. There's basically 2 main characters, a man and a woman, and they do a lot of bickering. And the woman, Joan, is incredible, is very larger than life. You know, she turns up with a Stetson and a revolver and on a boat, and the boat sinks, and she's like, I'm here and this is what I'm going to do. And she's a woman from this time period. I think this was written about 1910. I think it's set a bit before then, where women didn't do all those things. So she is breaking new ground with everything that she does, and she does it with wits and wiles and pure grit. And that's great. The other main character, who we actually spend most of the time with, is an Englishman, and he's there mainly to kind of argue with Joan and reflect on Joan and think about what she's doing, and this isn't the proper way of doing things. I found their dynamic very interesting to read. I thought the climax was very good, actually. Really nice to read. But, it's a big but. This book is set in the Solomon Islands, and the main character, Dave Sheldon, I think he's called, and Joan are plantation owners, and they are not slavers, because slavery is outlawed, but they do a lot of recruiting, where they get people who can't read English to sign contracts that they don't understand, and they do pay them, but they really don't pay them very much, and they treat them very, very badly, and then for some reason the workers are uprising, and we have to deal with this. And I feel like I was following the bad guys, because it's just modern sensibilities, you know, of knowing that this is wrong. and the main characters are doing something that is evil, ultimately, in how they treat these people, and how the book also treats the people working in the plantations. You know, the way they are described, the way the characters talk about them, the way the characters talk to them, the way the book describes how they talk to each other. Very, very uncomfortable to read. And this is something that I have come across in the past when reading books that are old, because that happens, you know. And I'm generally fine with, you know, words that you're not allowed to say today being written down, because that was how people spoke in those times. But to have the people working on the plantation be described so consistently in that horrible way was hard to read. And it definitely impacted my enjoyment of the book, more so than it has done in other books that I've read that uses that language or covers these kind of topics. So yeah, I think an interesting time capsule, let's say, on how people viewed the Solomon Islands and the plantations there and things like that. But that's my wrap up of what I've read in November. Please comment below if you've read any of these books, and please give the video a like. Please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And what I really appreciate most is for you to get out of my house!